Um, we're gonna get started. Welcome. So first, we're gonna introduce ourselves. So welcome everyone. My name is Simon. I'm the director of technology for Evolving Web. So my role is basically to manage a team of developers. Sorry. And with me today, I'm with Darisa, which is part of my team.
Hi everyone, my name is Darisa Spinat. I am a Drupal developer here at Evolving Web. Well, I say here, but yeah. And yeah, I do training, I do development, I lead some projects. Today, the one that we're going to talk about today was one of them, so it will be fun.
So before we start, a quick sponsor break, obligatory information. So Evolving Web is a Montreal-based agency. We're a full-service digital agency. We mainly do Drupal. That's our main specialization, but we also do a small fraction of WordPress projects. We're one of the Diamond Certified Drupal partners. We've been part of the Drupal CMS team. Darisa here was the lead of the analytics track. So if you've been using Drupal CMS and enabled the analytics recipe, that's Darisa's work. I mean, round of applause if you want. That's fine. I think it's great. And as Darisa said, we do trainings. Darisa is our lead trainer. And I mean, we're bragging about 5,000 trained people since 2011. But I think, Darisa, you might have been training at least 1,000 of them. So, and we're also organizing an event series around Drupal since a few years that I encourage you to check out. All right, in that session, there's a backstory to that session, so I'm gonna tell you everything in a short while. We're gonna touch about like the choices between Drupal and WordPress and the transition we had to make on that specific project. And it also touched the challenges of standardizing a web platform in a large organization. So without further ado, we're gonna start with a quick disclaimer. So the gist of that presentation is fairly accessible to any level, but I'm pretty sure there's developers in the room or technical people, and you all want to see some code, so we have a little bit more advanced slides, but we've marked those so that don't feel afraid if you're not getting those. Just wait for the next slides. There have been some crazy too, but we've labeled them accordingly. So the backstory. So basically, we're going to tell you the story of the website of BC Builds Home for People. That website's basically an informational website, fairly simple and small website to deliver information about a housing program of BC Housing, which is the public body that implements housing policies, specifically social housing policies in British Columbia, Canada. And well, if we had today Drupal CMS and Experience Builder, I mean, obviously it would be the tool of choice, and we'd be able to develop that kind of website fairly quickly. But what we want to demonstrate today is like, it's actually already possible with the Drupal we have today to build simple and small website fairly quickly. It doesn't have to be considered super complex. So what's interesting is that we're gonna consider the question about how do you choose between tools, and especially between WordPress and Drupal and a project like that. But we're also going to see how it can be a challenge when you deal with a large organization that has some needs for standardization. So Drupal or WordPress? Well, in a way, right now they're pretty similar. When it comes to small websites, they can be both considered. The general sentiment is like usually WordPress is easier to get started with. It's quicker in terms of hitting the road and being up and running. But what we also need to consider is like it's not only how much time you need to get up and running and have a website live, but also how much complex and how much effort it's going to require to maintain that on the long run, specifically in an organization where you have multiple websites to maintain. You can imagine that a large provincial public body with multiple programs has a fairly large number of websites to maintain. So basically, we're facing an interesting story where, let's say, the team that was spearheading that program mandated an agency to build the website, and they decided to go with WordPress, which in a sense is not a bad pick, like in itself. I mean, WordPress is fairly capable, and they were successful. They were about to launch, and at Evolving Web, we are providing consultancy services for the web team of the whole BC housing. And then they call us one day, and they're like, oh, the team gave us the website, now they're asking us for hosting, but it's a WordPress website, and as you know, we're all standardized on Drupal, and we don't know what to do. And the story we're going to tell is that basically we had to rebuild everything in Drupal weeks before the launch. So as a little segue, I think it's important to remind you that long-term thinking is important, even for small projects. Obviously, content editors, let's say system administrators, all the stakeholders in the project, they want something fast and efficient, and they want you to deliver as fast as possible. But an organization that manages multiple websites, it's not the only side of the equation, and standardization matters. And well, we might wonder why there is so many challenges with that, right? It's even if an organization like that has built a practice around Drupal, why don't we just go live with that WordPress? Like, after all, WordPress is pretty similar. It's also built with PHP and MySQL. It's not that hard to put a WordPress instance, even on the same servers, than a Drupal infrastructure, right? Well, it's a bit more complex than that when it comes to running a fleet of websites, because, well, when you have a team and you want to manage multiple web properties and you standardize, it's because you want to avoid having to be trained on a lot of tools. You want to avoid to have to develop a lot of practices and processes. It's also hard to make sure that all your web, like public-facing web properties, are going to be all respecting the content governance and the brand guidelines if you have to manage multiple tools. And there's also a security risk. In any time a company decides to adopt a new tool, it has to be considered how do you make sure that all the websites remain secure. It's an actual process in itself, so you have to develop something like that. And we're not going to do that just for one website. It's not worth it. We're a small team. We have everything for that we need for Drupal. So we're gonna have to figure out a way to rebuild the website in Drupal. It's just a reminder that Drupal is actually very interesting as a central tool when it comes to standardization. In a sense, there's nothing that prevents an organization to use WordPress to do the exact same thing. What is a little bit more uncommon would be to have them both at the center of that picture, because that basically means having to maintain to double all the integrations, to double all the processes, and it's only makes sense for like a fairly large organization where you can justify having Drupal for specific use cases and WordPress for the others, which wasn't the case in that situation. So entering that process of figuring out how we're going to be able to approach that creation and like convert that to something that web team could handle, could deploy and handle. What was the starting point? So we had a finished website, let's say an almost finished WordPress website. Content entry happened. They were happy with what they had. There was a Figma design that we considered incomplete. The reason I'm saying that is that it was a quick website, and usually it's just like a couple of mock-ups, and they actually finished and fine-tuned directly in WordPress. So we had a worried client, basically, and a few weeks to figure out a solution. And what were the actual issues we were facing? I touched base a little bit about that, but it's the actual heavy reliance on the WYSIWYG approach when it comes to content. The WordPress block editor, Gutenberg, if you will, is really amazing. We're going to have a really interesting competitive tool with Experience Builder when it lands, but it's not a silver bullet. It has to be used properly, and in that case, because the design were not robust enough, there was a lot of inconsistencies in the way it was actually implemented on the WordPress website, because it was not structured enough in a way it was. Like, to give you an example, I think I'm not kidding, all the sections, the multi-column sections, had all different ratios, because everything was like built as a one-of-a-kind element. So when we think about the WYSIWYG, content editors, they want that because if it's not there, they feel like they get a command line tool to manage content. But they want something that seems easy to use from the get-go and that doesn't require a lot of training. But the thing is, like with that particular example, on the terminal it's LaTeX. If you know what it is, it's what gets used to produce most of the scientific paper publications. So the tool is complex, but in return you get something super structured that's always going to respect typographic rules, and it's always going to be super readable, accessible, and going to be very approachable for people that enjoy that kind of consistent content. Whereas if you just use a completely free WYSIWYG tool, you're going to probably end up with more like a middle school textbook, or even a high school student PowerPoint presentation. So basically, in a nutshell, even if it feels easier at first to just use a completely free WYSIWYG approach, it quickly and more often than not end up in like some kind of messy situation when you have content that's harder to maintain and harder to understand. Whereas on the other hand, if you approach a little bit more structured approach, even if there's like a little bit higher barrier of entry, which requires a little bit of training, which is not that hard in the end, you have by default, by design, a clean, structured system, which is more future-proof, easier to maintain, and sometimes even more reusable, meaning you can change the design more easily, or you can even repurpose that content on different channels by using a decoupled approach, for example. So with that very high-level introduction, I'm going to let Darisa present how it actually played out.
Great. So, yeah, we had to rebuild it, so how are we going to do it? And then this is what happened. We had to start for, like, the first thing that we do in every project. We have to plan the thing. So what were the steps we took? Well, Simon already mentioned that we had a Figma file, and that Figma file was a little bit incomplete, or very incomplete, right? So we had to start by looking at the things and decide how we were going to standardize. Initially, we talked to a client, and we had agreed to limit the options, because all your columns in all the pages have different proportions, and also all the images in all the pages have different ratios. So how are we going to work with that? Okay, we came up with another version of that Figma file to limit this stuff. So that was one of the first parts. We took the Figma, we started to clean it up. We had to identify what were the components that existed in the website, and then identify what were reusable from those. And then, of course, align design with implementation. So these are all the steps we took. But we still needed to decide some stuff. Like, we know we're in Drupal. We have to do it in Drupal. We have a couple of weeks. So we need to choose. What are we going to do? Are we going to do layout builder or layout paragraphs? Paragraphs only? Why, if the site is so small, why don't we just take over the HTML and put it in a CK editor field? Is that an option? Can we go that route instead? So we had to think about all of that, and also what was going to be the data migration approach. Here, spoiler alert, we didn't go with CK editor, for sure. So we had to go between layout builder or layout paragraphs. We're going to look into that in a little bit. First, let's talk about the cleanup and how that happened, okay? When we're talking about cleaning up Figma, well, we took the site. The Figma was incomplete, so we couldn't really start based on it. We had to use the production site. So we took the site, we started to identify what were all the different components, what were the things in there that could be used as components. So these are just 2 pages that we have, for example, and you can see that the components in them are not repeated, not once. And this was happening in all the pages. So we had to come up with a spreadsheet, which we love, as usual. And in this spreadsheet, we started to decide or define right up there, document, what were the components that existed on each of the pages. So we had like different tabs for each page, and we tried to abstract that information to figure out, okay, this could work as a component, and this component can have these variations. So for example, here at the top, there was, the first component is like a hero. You can see there is a title, and then there is an image. So we started to say there, okay, this is this component, it can have these fields. If it were going to be that, this is what we need to do. We went through that for multiple pages. This one was one of the big ones. This one was actually quite small. It only had those 2 components that you see there. And then once we went through this process with all of the pages, we needed to check what could be abstracted, because we are not going to create 70 components, right? We want to decide how we're going to build it. And here, we had to extract, again, what was the content that existed, and then how we could style it, right? So we ended up with yet another tab in that spreadsheet that has information about those components. So based on the previous ones, we started to identify patterns and come up with what is the final list of components we're going to build. We have some options, because we can make it be very complex, or we can make it be primitive components, and then have more like a Lego pieces where the client can mix and match to build pages. So this is part of what we had to do. We came up with that list. You can see here some section here, a quick links text, and there were some other components in there. So in this part, we had the list of what was the component, what is the description of it, how it behaves, what are the fields that it has. If it had some options for styling it differently, meaning the same component can show up in different ways, it can have some variations. So we had that all here. Great. We know the components. Now what? Well, now we have to build it, but we haven't made our mind into what is going to be the approach. And then here, the things that we knew were, it needs to be something fast, but here fast means 2 things. It needs to be fast for us to develop, because we only have a couple of weeks, and it also needs to be fast for the client to use it, right? They need to be able to use it quickly. So there is that. We need to allow for unstructured content in a way, because all of these pages were different, so that needed to stay. But at the same time, it needs to be scalable. We cannot leave something there that is very difficult to maintain. We cannot have that being something that the client is going to be stuck on, or that we're just going to throw away later. So it needs to be scalable, and it needs to allow for standardization. So again, as an alternative to be fast, we could have copied the HTML, but that was not scalable. So it's not meeting the criteria. So we had layout builder and layout paragraphs, which meet the criteria in general, and then we had to make our mind. So what did we use? We used layout paragraphs. And then you might ask, why? Right? Layout builder is the one that is in core, so why layout paragraphs? Well, in this case, we needed the project to be ready quickly. The client only needed to add in those pages content that they were creating, no extra blocks, nothing else, just the content they were creating. And then also, layout paragraphs was easier to set up. It includes less modules. Like you just add the layout paragraphs module and you enable layout discovery and you're good to go. So it was easy to do it. And in any case, we needed to create the components, which could have been block content if we were using layout builder, or paragraphs if we're using layout paragraphs. But they needed to be created either way. So we did the configuration in that way. Now, this means that we are creating all of those pieces for the client to assemble pages. And here is where we talk about the Lego pieces approach. This is something that we have talked a lot during the week, probably. You have all heard it and seen the Lego pieces already. And we're always thinking about Drupal as that. Like, you can use modules, which are your Lego pieces, and then you can assemble them to form sites. We can do the same analogy at the page building level. So we have, with this approach, all those little components are our Lego pieces, and the page that we build is the Lego set, right? So the idea of this approach is that we can have flexibility and structure at the same time, and that is going to create a scalable content, which is what we wanted in this case. And that can be achieved by having small blocks and layouts configured. So how do we ended up balancing flexibility with the structure? By using layout paragraphs, we ended up with something like this for our pages. And it looks pretty simple here, but you can see already a couple of things, or you might notice a couple of things. First one is we have those first two fields, which are our structure part. We notice that in all of the pages, the first component that needed to be there was a hero. So what we did was make sure that it was always going to be a hero component. So that's why we created that field. That is just a reference to the hero component that we created. And then the part that is unstructured in this case, or more flexible, is the part below, which is the content field. And this content field basically allows you to define sections with different layouts and amounts of columns and amount of sections, and you can add your paragraphs inside of it. Mix and match and just build it in whatever way you want. So again, structured part in orange, unstructured part in green. And then the client is ready to just add whatever they want in the way they want it. We can also limit, for example, what are the components that we can add in each different type of sections. So, and it is done in a very easy way, so we can see it in a bit. The small pieces were this. I can tell you we have this, like, we decided to go with a mix of complex components like accordions and primitive components. So we have, I don't know if you can see, but there is a text component and a media component. Instead of having a card component with variations, we had media and text separated. So the user could choose to make the media full width, or a banner, or add it in a content on a section that had two columns. And then one column was the image, and the other one was the text. So this is how it worked. Now, this sounds great in theory, but of course there are challenges. And the problem is that at the end the client really wanted a one-to-one copy with a WordPress website. And yeah, it's not possible. It cannot be 100% the same unless it is just an unmanageable copy. So it cannot happen. The other thing that happened is that in this case, and we have mentioned it already, that WordPress website was a big collection of special cases and deviations from the design. And they still wanted that same thing in the final Drupal rebuild. So that was complex as well. And the other thing that happened was there was some skepticism at the beginning from the client. Like they were like, I don't think that's going to work. I don't think we're going to like it. We love the Gutenberg approach. So it's going to be weird. But again, we tried to solve it. In this case, one of the main issues, let's say, was that we had a site that was already almost good for production. So having that side as the real spec of the new website is a double-edged sword, right? It's complex. How do we handle those challenges? Well, we use layout paragraphs, we use style options, and we use single directory components. Layout paragraphs, we use it because, as I told you before, it allows us to switch from a flat structure of components that are very structured into something that is more interactive. And all of that can be defined via the paragraphs because it supports layouts in the same paragraphs, and then we can define what are the components allowed. And also, from there, it is just like if we were using Layout Builder, but with less configuration steps. So that was one of the things. The next thing, and here comes the trigger alert, was using style options. Style options is another Drupal module, but it is a contributed Drupal module. The thing with it is part of the Mercury editor ecosystem, so it is what Mercury editor is using under the hood, but if all of us want to use it, that's perfect, but it is not ready for final users or content editors. This is a module that is specific for developers. So if we want to have something like this, what the module does at the end is it provides an API that allows the developer to define what options are we going to allow on the different components. And then it creates this styles tab with the list of those configuration options. So in this case, you can see there is some stuff for defining the margin of the section and the vertical placement and the background color if we wanted some padding. All of those options were options that we identified on the Figma analysis, like on the website analysis, and then we had to come up and develop that part and map what were the options that we wanted to have on each component. So you will see that they are all different. They all have different options. Again, this is done via code. So I'm going to show a little bit of code in the next 2 slides, or three slides. So that is what allows us to create something like this. The good thing about style options is that it allows us to separate what is actually content from what we have as configuration options for the components, right? A lot of the time we have to use a field to say, okay, in what side of the card do you want to have your image? And that's not really content, but we have to do it that way. With the style options, we separate it and we add it in to the styles tab. What is it that we have to do as developers to get that up and running? Well, the first thing is we need to create a class. And that class needs to have a particular denotation because this is a plugin. In this case, this one was called background color. This was to support different colors in the background of the sections. What happened here is we need to build a form. So we just use the form API to set it up here. You can see here the colors with the names, and that's exactly what we are doing to show this field down here. So that's that part. Just creating the class is not enough, because creating the class is, okay, we created the plugin. If we want to actually make it available, there are 2 more things that need to happen. The first one is we need to register it anyways. Even though it is a plugin and it has the discovery mechanism here in the annotation or the PHP attribute now, we need to create another file called, it has the extension styleoptions.yaml, and then in here, we need to define the key options, like in line 2, and then start defining what are those options. So here, you will add the ID of it, what is the plugin, the label, and the method. Like, how is it going to apply these values? So this was that part. Here you can see a couple of those. You can generate as many as you want, and then you can have your module used everywhere, right? This is yet not enough. Here we just declare them as options that are available. But when we want to say this option is in this paragraph, we have to do a mapping. And for that, in the same file, you're going to define in line 53 the contexts. And then you can define these style options for everything. Like, it doesn't have to be just paragraphs. This can support notes or any other content entity in Drupal. And then you just define the content entity type name or content entity type ID. You add the name of your item. So in this case, there was a section paragraph type. There was a hero paragraph type. There was a text paragraph type. So those are the things that I added there. And for each of them, I defined the options that they have available. So in the section, you can see I have the section component options and the background color. So the component options, if I go back, are all of these other options until the padding. In that particular class, I define all of those fields. And that's what I am declaring here. Once I have done that, I will have those things available in the UI. And from there, all I need to do is access the values using preprocess functions. And we're done. That was the hard part. That was the code part. And the next part that we used was single directory components that I mentioned before. In this case, we did it this way because, again, it is a new way of doing theming in Drupal. It is now supported in core. It's the way that we should go from now. By doing it this way, we are almost ready for Experience Builder eventually as well. So we have those things here. And this site was small based on the analysis we did and the variations that we supported. This is all the list of components that we created. So that's it. There's no more. Those are the only components. And we could work based on that. So let's do a little demo of how it looks like. Just let me find my mouse. It's dancing around. Here, okay. Yeah. I just don't remember where I normally go. Here directly? Oh, great. Thank you. This one. Okay, all good. So here is the pages. So how does it look like for the content editor? They basically can come here to add content. And here, they will choose the content type. So I'm going to go to create a new basic page. And then, as I told you, those are the fields. So I'm going to say this is the DrupalCon Atlanta 2025. And then we can start adding the stuff. In our case, we added the hero here. The hero has a couple of variations. So depending on what fields we fill up, it shows up differently. So there is that. But you can also see the style options for it. So we can align the text to the left or to the right. And we can choose the color of the title text. I'm going to copy my content here. And then here, day 3 is about to end. And then I'm good. I'm going to add some media. I have a couple of files in here. I'm going to add this one. It's there. Again, I could choose some colors. I'm going to leave it like this for now. And then I have it. Here, that's all you can see. That's the preview. So that's the downside, let's say. But you have the components there. And down here, we have the content. So for the content, as I told you, this works using the same API than Layout Builder. So you can add a section, and that allows you to choose how many columns you want. This is also configurable in your section component, and you can work with that. You can give it a name, and you can also add some options. So in my case, I'm going to make it green, and I'm going to add some padding around it, and save it, and I will add some content inside. Here, I will choose some text, and that text component, I'm going to copy over from here. We're here, save. If I want to do some edits to it, I can just click on the pencil button. And again, I have some style options. So for example, there was an option where we wanted to have like the text taking the full width of the page or just 680 pixels. Those were the only two options that we had at the beginning. But when we were very, very, very close to the launch, they were like, no, in this page we need it to be narrower. So we had to come up and create another variant here. But this is the kind of things that we can choose there. I will leave it as is, have that, and I can start adding more sections. So this one, for example, I'm going to make it 2 columns, 50-50. I'm going to make it be purple, and I will save that. And then I can start creating my card-like component, but with primitive items. So here I will go and add my media directly. So I will add that one for Experience Builder. You can see that for the images, there were different options as well. We can have the placement being a little bit different. The styling could also be different, like it could be just like a decorative image, or framed, or be full width. Everything could happen. We could also hide the image when on mobile. All of that were options. And then here, I'm going to add some text again. So for the text, remember, we have this one. Okay. Oh, I couldn't select. Sorry about that. And we're good. So here, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep this one default. Sorry. The center one was the other one. We'll see an error there in a second. But we can see how it looks like, how it is different. If I save it at this point, you can see already how it looks like. So we have our image, we have our component there. I had already centered it, I think. No, it is not centered. Sorry about that. The perspective made me think it was. So this is totally to the left based on the container that it had. And then here we have that other part. But if we want to keep editing, because that's not great yet, we can. So for this one, for example, the one in the top, I'm going to make it centered here. And I'm going to add just another region here for 2 columns. In this case, you can see all the values that we had to support for proportions, because in the original site, they were all different in all the pages. So we had to give a lot of options there. If I add something here, I can deal with that still. You can see here the separation. So I'm going to add my text in here. This one is going to be a small one. I'm going to align it to the right, so it is closer to the image. And in this other section, I'm going to add my other image. So media again, something here. Let's say this one. And I'm good to go. Once I have done that, I think I already have this thing centered. I have these elements here. I have this thing here. You can see how we can mix and match all of this stuff, and we have the rest of the page already built. And then with all these components, we could just create any amount of pages, and they could look different depending on what the user wants to build. So yeah, that was the demo, okay? I'm gonna go back to showing this here. And yeah, what happened next?
Well, the demo went well, I think. That deserves a round of applause. Thanks, Darisa. Well, as we said, the client was pretty worried at the beginning, but when they discovered like that, how it looked like using something a little bit more structured in Drupal, they loved it. that's a pattern example of what happens if you leave a WYSIWYG field in the hands of a developer. But what happened is like they liked that approach so much that for the next build out, they actually directly ask us, like this is the next step, the next website, the next program that they rolled out, they specifically asked to use that method. And this time, because we had more time, we weren't like redoing something in a silly way, we had the opportunity to build it with Layout Builder, so they discovered like the actual way of doing that. That's part of the core. And they actually asked us to start considering how they can actually start transitioning their old main mothership website from that is currently just only using a big body WYSIWYG text field to using Layout Builder and start having that componentized approach to page building. So, Larissa, I'm going to let you summarize the
Yeah. So in that other case, they requested specifically for the same approach. We went with Layout Builder. So why? What's the difference, right? Why do we choose one over the other? Well, the reality is that both serve very similar use cases. So in most of the cases, it's fine, right? The main differences rely on these points. So first, Layout Builder is in core, so you already have it by default. And Layout Paragraphs is a contributed module. So you will have to add something extra and then support that and update it in a different cadence to the rest of your core. That's one of it. Then the second point is the Layout Builder base, even though it is in core, it actually, because it is in core, is not like so complete. It is complete for what it is, right? But then for making it actually user-friendly, we need to add a lot of stuff. We need to add some extra modules like Layout Builder restrictions or Layout Builder, I lost the word, restrictions, Layout Builder browser, that was the word. Those are just two examples, but there are some other modules that we can add to make the thing actually more friendly. But we need to add them, and they are a lot, right? And then you still get your user with a lot of configuration options. So you have to limit them for them to be able to create content easily and not be lost in the interface. With Layout Paragraphs, we don't need anything extra. Just a Layout Paragraphs does everything by relying on the base of the Layout Builder API. So it uses the layout discovery, it uses the same layouts. So the same layouts that you are using in your Layout Builder site can be used for Layout Paragraphs without issues. As I told you, Layout Builder requires extra configuration, while Layout Paragraphs doesn't. Everything is done there. And I can show you later, because I don't know if we'll have time, but we could even see how all those configurations for Layout Paragraphs can be done directly in the paragraph that you're creating. The only thing that you need is you create your section paragraph, or the container, let's say. You tell Layout Paragraphs that you want to use that one as a container, and you can also define what are the possible paragraph types that it can hold. All of that in the same page. So that's why it is faster. Like, you have to configure it, yes, but it is super fast. It is in the same page. While Layout Builder, you have to get more modules. You have to go to each module configuration page. You have to exclude or add specific things. So yeah, now, disclaimer here. Even though Dash was built with Layout Builder, and I'm saying all this stuff about it taking more time, Layout Builder taking more time to configure, Dash project was released in just 1 month. So we used the same rapid development kind of thing, and we were able to deliver that other side following the same approach, just changing a little bit that decision, and we were able to deliver it very quickly. So some key takeaways for the session is when we have to migrate into Drupal, or when we want to migrate into Drupal, we need to rethink the content strategy. There is no other way around it. We have to think about it and decide what is going to be what we are going to do. Then the structured content is actually key to maintainability. And we're not just talking about the development, maintaining the site, but also the content editors maintaining the content. We don't have to wait for Experience Builder to be ready to have nice things fast. We have seen 2 examples here using 2 different things that are already out there in the community and in core, and they can be used, and we get good results. And then finally, layout builder and layout paragraphs both work, and they work fine. It's a matter of preference. What is the approach we want to take? So yeah, thank you so much.
We have 5 minutes for question while you enjoy my shameless promotion for upcoming events in Boston.
I have a question about like we have a similar problem that we're trying to solve where I work. As far as like if you were rebuilding microsites coming from WordPress or another CMS, do you think would you bias toward layout paragraphs versus layout builder, dependent on if those sites have a lot of reusable content versus if they're mostly just basic pages?
So the question was, are you going to favor more layout builder or layout paragraph in the context of migrating WordPress websites to Drupal, depending on whether there's elements of content that are heavily reused across the pages, or if every page has its own specific content?
Yeah. And then I will say that I will favor the one that serves most in each case. So for example, these 2 were moving out, right? Kind of. So in one case, the only things we needed to add in those pages were content directly. So I will favor, in that case, layout paragraphs. It's fast, and it gets the job done. If you have to add not just that, but also some extra blocks or other kind of content that you might have that is other content entities, right? Sorry? Or views. Well, views is questionable. I will explain why in a second.
Views is always questionable.
Yeah. So if you have to add some other block, let's say you have a block for, I don't know, subscribing, and then you have that block that is reusable in all of the pages. That you will create it as a block and not as a paragraph, right? So I will prefer in that case, if I have that kind of situations, I will go layout builder because I can add it easily. With views, the thing is that if you want to just use core, yes, go layout builder. But in this site that I showed, the busy builds, we had a views component there because we were using a block reference field. So we configured a views reference for it, and then we could embed views as well. So in that case, I let it in the same case.
Thank you so much. What did you guys choose to do on the layout builder projects style-wise? Was it similar to what you did for layout paragraphs or different? Does that make sense?
What we chose to do in terms of the admin UI?
Yes, like you had that code set up for paragraphs, right? For like selecting the color and stuff.
Okay.
Was something similar in layout builder?
So the equivalent for the
Yeah.
equivalent, yeah.
So in the case of the layout builder, honestly, we could do the same, but in that project, I don't think it was done. I think we just used the generic like fields as options, but it could be done.
There was less of a use because the project boundaries, the specifications were better defined, and everything could be encapsulated directly in the SDCs themselves. So we didn't have the need, but we would have been debating both solutions. The one we depicted here is cleaner, as Dariza said, because it avoids mixing the content with like presentation concerns, basically. Last chance. No? Another question? Well, thank you very much for your attention. And have a nice stand-up conference.